Have you ever stopped to think about how cultures really blend together over time, sometimes in ways you just don't expect? It's a fascinating idea, isn't it? Cultures aren't static. They sort of mix and reshape each other constantly. Today, we're doing a deep dive looking at some fantastic source material detailing the huge impact of four major non-Hindu cultures on India. We're talking Buddhism, Jainism, Islam, and Christianity. And it's not just about when they arrived, it's more about the ripple effects, how they touch everything from daily life to, well, even grand architecture. Our mission today is to pull out the key insights and really get a handle on this incredibly rich history.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is that these influences weren't always like direct or immediate. Often they were quite subtle. But they transformed India in some surprising ways, socially, economically, politically, religiously, even artistically. It really pushes you to look beyond the simple stories and see this complex dance of cultural exchange.
That's a great way to put it, a dance. Okay, so let's start with Buddhism. It emerged, around the 6th century BCE? And it was a quiet transformer, as you said. It really challenged the existing Brahmanical rituals, the whole caste system. Instead of focusing on traditional gods or souls, Buddha championed, well, something quite different: soullessness, anatta, and renunciation.
Right. It gained royal support early on, but funnily enough, its influence within India eventually faded, even while it exploded elsewhere.
So what was its lasting mark inside India then?
Well, socially, the impact was profound. Buddhism had this very accommodative spirit, It actually helped in the, let's call it, Indianization of foreign groups settling in India, people like the Persians, Sakas, Kushans. Initially, they could keep their own customs, even their names. But then, as Buddhism declined, these groups were sort of absorbed into Hindu society. It added this incredible layer to India's ethnic complexity.
Wow, imagine that a faith so open it lets outsiders integrate without immediately demanding they change everything. That's pretty powerful accommodation.
It really is. And this social shift had knock-on effects, especially economically. Buddhism also raised the status of the Vaishyas, the merchant class. Traditionally, they were lower down, but Buddha recognized their economic importance. They provided capital for farmers. So he gave them a higher standing than the Brahmins did.
Okay, so it wasn't just about philosophy. It had real-world social and economic consequences.
Absolutely. And that reached down to the lower castes, too. Buddhism encouraged them to take up honorable jobs like farming. And crucially, it told them they could seek nirvana. That implicitly chipped away at caste by the Ottoman. Inequality, salvation wasn't tied to your birth.
And thinking about the economy, Buddhism really pushed for an agricultural base, didn't it? That core idea of ahimsa, nonviolence.
Exactly. Protecting animals, especially cattle, they called them friends, was vital because they were essential for farming. Agricultural economy could support way more people than a pastoral one.
So it wasn't just a moral principle, it was practical economics too.
And it went further. Buddhism actually recommended that kings should help peasants by supplying seeds, cattle, farming tools, like a blueprint for state-supported agriculture.
That's quite forward thinking.
It helped villages thrive, which then supported growing towns. Plus, Buddhism was positive about foreign trade. That meant more prosperity for merchants and craftsmen, which again fueled urban growth.
Okay, shifting gears to politics. Ahimsa played a role there too, but maybe it was a double-edged sword. This idea of peace at any cost.
Well, yes. Some argue that the emphasis on peace and compromise might have, maybe inadvertently, given invaders an advantage sometimes. But on the flip side, it fostered really strong international ties. India became a kind of holy land for Buddhists abroad, and it promoted this idea of Dharma Vijay conquest through righteousness instead of just military conquest, Digvijay.
That must have fostered a different kind of unity, maybe, a sense of belonging.
I think so. A sense of belonging to one religion, maybe even one nation. Yeah. And don't forget the Buddhist sanghas, the monastic communities, the way they settled disputes, often using democratic methods. That democratic spirit definitely had an influence on wider Indian political thinking.
Interesting. Now, religion itself, Buddhism introduced something pretty revolutionary: idol worship.
That's right. Before Buddhism, you had Vedic Aryans making sacrifices outdoors. But once people started making statues of the Buddha and worshiping them, they needed places to keep these statues. And that led to building temples.
Ah, so that's the origin. And it influenced Hinduism's structure, too.
Definitely. Hinduism had its holy men, sadhus, but they were mostly isolated. Buddhism introduced these organized monastic orders, monks living together under common rules. Hinduism later adopted that kind of organizational structure. It just offered a simpler, more popular form of religion. And its internal energy, its intellectual depth, really helped its influence spread.
What about language and education? That seems like another big area. Buddha preaching in Pali, the common language, not Sanskrit. What effect did that have?
Huge effect. It massively boosted the development of Pali as a literary language. You had brilliant Buddhist scholars like Vasubandhu writing on ethics, psychology, Nagarjuna on medicine, chemistry, philosophy. A vast literature emerged.
So democratized knowledge in a way.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And the Buddhist viharas, the monasteries, became major education centers, often backed by kings. Critically, and this was unique for the time, Buddhism opened up education to women and people from lower sections of society right from the start.
That's remarkable. And finally, art and architecture. You can't talk about Buddhism without mentioning the art, right?
Absolutely not. People often say the history of Indian art really kicks off with the Buddhist period. The monasteries weren't just for learning. They were buzzing with artistic creation.
That's how we're talking about.
Stupas, viharas, chaitas, those amazing carved pillars. Just think of places like Sanchi, Barhut, Bodh Amaravati, incredible carvings, paintings, a really distinct artistic legacy.
Okay, let's pivot now to Jainism. Like Buddhism, it started as a sort of protest against Brahmanical dominance in caste.
Yes, very similar initial impulse. Although, interestingly, Jainism itself eventually developed some caste distinctions over time.
Socially, it shared that idea with Buddhism that caste shouldn't block the path to nirvana.
It did. Mahavira, the key figure, seems to have had a pretty liberal attitude. His first female disciple was apparently a captured slave girl. And Jain monks were known to accept food from lower classes, like weavers. They also generally favored traders and merchants, much like Buddhists, and even tried to improve conditions for slaves. Lay followers were forbidden from trading in people.
And Jainism brought its own unique philosophy too, right? Theravada?
Yes, Theravada. It's a fascinating philosophy of multi-sided reality. Basically, the idea that truth looks different depending on your viewpoint. A really original way of thinking about knowledge and perspective.
But the thing most people probably associate with Jainism is ahimsa, nonviolence, taken to an extreme.
Oh, absolutely. Mahavira stressed non-injury in thought, word, and deed, not just to animals, but even to plants, maybe even stones. It was a direct challenge to things like animal sacrifices and yajnas.
So economically, how did that play out if you're that strict about nonviolence?
Well, it had a huge impact. On one hand, it helped agriculture by stopping animal sacrifice, which preserved cattle needed for farming. Yeah. But it made it really difficult for farmers and artisans. I mean, farming involves killing pests, insects. Even harvesting plants could be seen as harming life.
Right. So just think about that for a second. A core belief that literally shapes what jobs people can realistically do. How does that change a society?
It meant that many Jains ended up specializing in things like trade and finance professions, less likely to involve direct harm to living beings. That's partly why you see a concentration of Jains in trade, especially in cities and port areas, like on India's west coast, even today.
Politically, was there an impact, similar to the argument about Buddhism and peace?
There's a similar discussion, yes. Some argue that the extreme focus on ahimsa might have dampened the martial spirit, perhaps making it easier for invaders later on. It's a debated point, of course.
And language. Like Buddhism, did they use the common tongue?
They did. Jains mostly preached in Prakrit and Ardhamagadi, the languages people actually spoke, unlike the Brahmins who stuck to Sanskrit. So again, a big boost for vernacular literature.
And art. Did they leave a mark there too?
Oh, definitely. They built stupas for their saints, similar to the Buddhists, often made of stone with gateways and pillars. And they created incredible cave temples. Think of the Tiger Cave at Udagiri, or the Indira Sabha at Ellora, the Hathigumpha caves in Odisha, plus magnificent temples like those at Gwalior and Mount Abu. Really significant contributions.
Okay, let's move forward in time now to Islam. It first arrived, you said, around the 10th century, but the major influence came later.
That's right. The really profound shaping influence started more around the 15th, 16th centuries with the establishment of powerful Muslim empires.
And socially, this was different from earlier invaders. They didn't just blend in.
Largely, no. Islam's strong monotheism meant that Muslim groups, Sayyids, Sheikhs, Mughals, Pathans, generally kept distinct identities. This added another layer, a very significant layer, to India's ethnic mix. And what's really fascinating is how a kind of caste-like system developed within Indian Islam. You had the Ashraf, the higher status groups, often claiming foreign descent, and the Ajlaf, the lower strata, who were mostly local converts.
So conversion didn't erase old hierarchies entirely?
Not always. Converts often brought their previous caste identities with them. For example, some Brahmin converts became Sayeds. Rajput converts might join Mughal or Sheikh groups, and occupational castes often kept their professional identities, like weavers, Julaha, or barbers, Nai. You see specific examples all over, like in Bengal or Kerala with the Mopla Muslims.
That resilience of social structure is amazing. And they preferred cities, you mentioned.
Generally, yes. There was perhaps more emphasis on material comforts, court life. They founded many new cities, Fatehpur Sikri, Aurangabad, Allahabad. They didn't typically settle in the countryside as farmers in the same way earlier groups might have.
But given the vast Hindu majority, there had to be some cooperation, right?
Absolutely. Despite efforts at conversion at times, coexistence and cooperation were essential. Many rulers actively sought friendly relations.
Economically, what was the impact? You mentioned urban centers.
Yes, so you saw craft flourish in towns and cities, catering to the Muslim elites. Trade, both internal and external, also got a boost. Foreign traders were welcomed, and there was even a revival of India's navy and sea trade for a time. They also helped push the monetization of the economy, making transactions easier, although it didn't really develop into what we'd call capitalism.
Politically, you mentioned uniformity. How did that manifest?
Well, think about the Mughal Empire. For 2 centuries, it gave a large part of India a single administrative system. And that system was so effective that even Hindu rulers copied parts of it later.
So a unified bureaucracy.
And a unified legal and judicial system across much of North India and the Deccan. Even things like court dress became standardized. Fortification techniques were perfected under the Mughals, and again, Hindu kings adopted those.
Any other political borrowings?
Interestingly, the practice of keeping slaves, which was established in Muslim societies, was also adopted by some Hindus. Firoz Tughlaq is often cited as an example of a ruler with many slaves.
Religiously, this is where it gets really interesting, isn't it? The interaction, the synthesis.
Oh, absolutely. This is a huge area. You had Sufi mystics and Hindu bhakti saints actively trying to find common ground to blend their ideas. Sufis adopted some Hindu practices. Hindus adopted ideas like universal brotherhood, social equality, and devotional worship, which were strong currents in Islam, especially Sufism. They often emphasized similar things: the unity of God, equality, condemning caste, focusing on love and devotion over empty rituals.
So it wasn't just conflict, it was also dialogue and blending.
Exactly. And this interaction, this ferment, was crucial for the Bhakti movement and even led to the formation of new faiths or syncretic movements. Think of Akbar's Din-i-Ilahi or the teachings of Kabir or Sikhism founded by Guru Nanak, all emphasizing that fundamentally Ram and Rahim are one.
That connects to the bigger picture, as you said earlier. It's not just absorption, it's creating something new together.
Precisely. And language. Islam gave India a whole new language, Urdu.
A blend of
Arabic, Persian, Turkish, and local Indian languages, essentially Sanskrit-derived languages. Persian especially had a huge influence on many Indian tongues, and you had Muslim scholars writing in Hindi, enriching it with Persian and Arabic words. Think of poets like Ras Khan or Khusro. Urdu even became the official language in some Hindu states for a while.
And education continued to be important.
Yes, mosques and madrasas became key educational institutions, often funded by rulers. Major university centers emerged in places like Agra and Fatehpur Sikri. And a massive technological introduction was paper.
Paper. That sounds simple, but I guess it changed everything.
Completely. It revolutionized record-keeping, writing history, legal proceedings, everything. It made writing and copying text so much easier.
Wow. Okay, let's touch on daily life stuff. Food, clothes.
Big impact there, too. Dishes we think of as Indian now, pulav, biryani, sweets like gulab jamun, jalebi, halwa, even sharbats. Many have roots in Islamic culinary traditions.
Dress.
Yes, styles like the sherwani, achkan, chudar pajamas. These were adopted by many Hindu men. And the purdah system, the veiling of women, while not really present among Hindus before, was adopted during this period.
Music and gardens, too, right?
Definitely. A beautiful blend of Persian and Hindustani music styles emerged, with royal patronage for musicians. New instruments became popular: the sitar, shinai, tabla, sarangi. Akbar's court, with singers like Tansen, was famous for it. And the Mughals were masters of gardening, bringing Persian and Turkish styles, creating stunning gardens like Shalimar Bagh or Nishat Bagh. You still see that influence.
Okay, our final major influence, Christianity. St. Thomas arrived early, but the main impact came much later.
That's right. St. Thomas in Kerala is traditionally dated to 52 AD, and the Portuguese spread Catholicism on the west coast later. But the really widespread dominant Christian influence came with the British.
Socially, did Christianity also get drawn into India's existing structures?
It did, yes. Christianity itself wasn't immune to Varna and Jati influences. Converts often came from scheduled castes, tribes, and other marginalized groups, which sometimes led to ethnic factions even within Christian communities. And it added more distinct ethnic groups, the Anglo-Indians being the most prominent from the British interaction, but also smaller Franco-Indian and Luso-Indian communities, each with their own customs.
Did it create new classes?
Missionaries played a big role through education. Their schools and colleges helped create a small but influential urban middle class.
Economically, the British influence tied to Christianity seems massive.
Yeah.
Modernization, industrialization.
Huge. The British brought significant changes in technology, agriculture, how business was done. This spurred industrialization, drew people to cities, and really started reshaping the Indian economy.
Did it change people's outlook too?
It certainly fueled a greater desire for, well, material progress, higher living standards. Western models were adopted. Some argue this weakened traditional spiritual focus and strengthened the pull of worldly comforts. You saw new lifestyles emerge, people imitating British ways, food habits changing, alcohol consumption, Western dress, dining styles.
But this modernization had downsides too. The market system.
Yes, the introduction of factory-made goods, a full-blown market economy, banks, new accounting, joint stock companies, while modern, it devastated many traditional rural crafts and undermined systems like the Jajmani system of reciprocal obligations.
Politically, the British brought new ideas, didn't they? You mentioned values earlier.
They did. Ideas like humanitarianism, rationalism, egalitarianism, secularism, these were introduced into the political discourse, even if inconsistently applied.
And how did that translate into structural change? You mentioned a new legal system earlier. What was the most profound change Christianity brought, maybe through the British?
That's a big question. The legal system is definitely a contender, replacing traditional caste and village justice systems with common law, legislation, formal courts, a police force that was a fundamental shift. It also led to the end of feudalism, making untouchability illegal, at least on paper, and profoundly altering institutions like marriage, family, property rights through modern laws. This opened up space for that new middle class we mentioned.
Religiously, you said materialism increased, but anything else?
Well, ironically, the improved communication and transport introduced by the British railways, telegraph made it easier for people to travel for traditional religious pilgrimages. And similar to other interactions, you saw syncretism. Converts often blended their old beliefs with Christian ones, creating unique local forms of Christianity.
And finally, language and education under the British.
English became dominant. It was made the medium of instruction across India. Formal schools and universities replaced or overshadowed traditional systems. This undoubtedly broadened horizons for some, raised awareness about rights and freedoms, but also very effectively spread English culture and perspectives.
And art and architecture.
You see typical British architectural styles in many public buildings from that era: courts, universities, churches, government offices. They also introduced concepts of formal urban planning, sometimes blending British and Indian layouts.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. Let's try to recap this whirlwind deep dive. 4 major cultures: Buddhism, Jainism, Islam, Christianity shaping India in profound ways. It really is this incredible mosaic, isn't it? Built over centuries. Buddhism brought that social absorption, economic changes favoring farming, the peace principle, idol worship, wider education.
Jainism emphasized that extreme ahimsa, impacting jobs, pushing people towards trade, gave us Yadavada and left amazing art.
Islam added layers of ethnic complexity, fueled urban growth, brought unified administration and law, sparked that incredible religious synthesis, gave us Urdu, and so many cultural elements in food, dress, music.
And Christianity, especially via the British, drove modernization, introduced new political values, formal education in English, technological shifts, and fundamentally altered the legal and economic landscape.
Okay, to really help lock this in, try to think about those key shifts. So for each religion, how did they deal with social hierarchy? Was it equality, or did new hierarchies form?
Right, or what economic changes did they drive? Agriculture or trade? And can you picture the unique architectural styles, the linguistic contributions? Seeing that variety really shows you that Indian culture isn't some fixed thing. It's alive, constantly evolving.
So considering how all these powerful forces brought unique changes, but also mixed in unexpected ways, that leads to a final thought, maybe.
It does. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our world today, with globalization connecting us more than ever, how are the cultures swirling around now, subtly reshaping our own societies in ways we probably won't fully grasp for centuries?
That is a truly thought-provoking question to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.